A disturbing truth was kept secret for years until the murder of an entire family exposed the horror. This is a survivor's story where this survivor went through many, many traumas, and she would find that the person who murdered her family also offered to adopt her and take her in. This case is truly unfathomable, and the police were really chastised for what they didn't do during the investigation that could have kept this girl safe. In fact, they did something that made it so she was in a very, very scary environment after her family was murdered. Some also believe that the person who was convicted as the killer was framed and that the killers remain among us. You are such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I am Brooke Makenna, and I am so thankful that you are here. If you like these kind of videos, subscribe. I post every single Sunday, and if you never want to miss an upload, you can sign up to the Genuine Gem newsletter down below, where I can personally send you my videos and you will never miss an upload. But first, a quick mention for our sponsor, Aura. We talk about safety a lot on this channel, but we often forget about online safety. Your information could be being sold by data brokers without you even knowing. That's why today's sponsor, Aura, is so important. After I heard this, I googled my information as well as my family members, and I was shocked at how much I could find that I don't want on the internet. Have you ever wondered how scammers get your phone call or how spam is sent to your email? Well, that's due to the data brokers that can sell your private info for millions of dollars. They do all of this without your consent, and most of us don't know how to legally move forward, and that they have to legally remove it if we ask, because the process is so difficult that we often don't even try. But Aura does it for you. Aura is an all-in-one digital security with 24/7 monitoring, real-time fraud alerts, and so much more to keep you safe. And you can try Aura for 14 days for free at aura.com/Brooke Mckenna. And in those 2 weeks, Aura will already be able to show you where your data is being exposed and sold and help you out with that. I use this all the time now and would highly recommend it to any of you who are wanting to keep your information safe. Just go to aura.com/Brooke Mckenna. Now let's get back to the story. So it was 2009 in Australia, and the Lynn family lived in North Epping, Sydney, New South Wales. Now this was a 45-year-old man who went by Norman, his 43-year-old wife, Yoon, who went by Lily, and their kids, who were 15-year-old Brenda, 12-year-old Henry, and 9-year-old Terry. Lily's sister, so the mother's sister, Irene, who was 39 years old, also lived with them at this time. The parents had migrated from China. They met in Sydney, and they were doing really well for themselves. They even ran a news agency. The store was always open on time. It was completely family run by the adults. Lily's sister Irene even worked there as well. And while doing so, Lily, the mother, also took really good care of her 3 kids. She spent so much time with them. She was always taking them everywhere. She was said to be a great mother. In fact, both parents were said to be so incredibly loving. Their children were wonderful. Brenda was said to be extremely intelligent. She was excelling in school and socially. Henry, who was 12 years old at the time, was said to be very outgoing. He was a middle child. He loved tennis. He loved badminton. He was easy to become friends with and was said to be a lot like his father. 9-year-old Terry was still finding himself, and he loved to follow his older sister Brenda's every single move. Surprisingly enough, these siblings actually got along. They even read books together on the couch so they could then speak about them like at a book club. Now, the eldest daughter, Brenda, was that typical 15-year-old who focused most of her time on teenage activities. She was so excited to go on this school trip to New Caledonia that summer. This was actually for the year 10 class to be able to study French. So that July, she prepared to fly overseas. The night prior, she had told her mother and Henry that she would miss them. Her brother Terry and her aunt were already asleep at this point, so she wasn't able to tell them that, but she knew that she would be able to tell her dad the next day at the airport. She would leave before they woke up the next morning. Now, at the airport, She did not end up telling her father that she loved him. She did not give him a hug. Basically, she didn't say anything to her father. She was getting kind of embarrassed as a teenager, and she also believed that she would see him in a week, that it was no big deal. She would later say this was her biggest regret. She had told herself that she would see them again soon. But how was she to know that her entire family would be murdered while she was gone, and she would come home unknowingly as a sole survivor? But Brenda had a dark family secret of her own that no one, especially investigators, could have predicted. But Brenda's dad, Norman, gave his daughter his phone so that she could call him when she arrived. However, she didn't end up calling him because, in her own words, she thought she was too cool of a 15-year-old to do so, like many teenagers are. But while on the trip, she would open up Facebook, and she wanted to see what her friends were all talking about. They had logged on to the computer. They had been sharing news articles with each other, but they wouldn't tell Brenda what it was about. They were kind of being quiet and secretive. Finally, they agreed to send her the article, and she clicked the link and saw a photo of her own home. This also had the title of Murders. She didn't believe it, but this is how she learned the news that not only had someone she loved passed away, but it was both of her brothers and her parents and her aunt, and they were all brutally murdered, all while she was a plane ride away. To her horror, she would learn that on July 18th of 2009, her parents' newspaper store hadn't been opened. Customers arrived at the usual hour where they would go in and get their newspapers, but the doors were not open, the lights were not on, and Norman and Lily never came. They all knew something was wrong, and so among those waiting were those who knew that they, Norman and Lily, had family members in the area who was Lily's sister Kathy and her husband Robert. So they decided to call Kathy and Robert and ask them what was going on. And because Kathy and Robert lived so close, they just headed over to the home. Around 9 a.m., they would find the front door unlocked. And it would be moments after walking inside that Kathy would call 000 for the police. During this call, Kathy was panicked. She was out of breath. She was asking for police while being transferred. The phone just kept ringing. No one was answering. When she finally got an officer on the phone, she wasn't sure the exact address. She was too emotional to tell the officer what was going on. She did eventually say that she needed an ambulance, and she said she thought someone was going to die, but she wasn't answering questions. Eventually, you can hear her say, "I think someone killed my family." She was speaking in her native language to someone in the background at that time as well. Then the phone call cut out and she called again, and she was screaming for someone to come. She was told they were already coming, and she wasn't answering questions. So the officer asked her directly if she had found a body, and she started explaining again that it was her brother's home.
Fire.
Hello?
Caller, do you have an emergency? Do you want the police, the fire, or the ambulance?
Yes, fire. Emergency, police and ambulance, please.
You want the police, and what?
Yeah, please,
yes.
and ambulance.
What state and town is your emergency in?
New South Wales.
Yes, what town in New South Wales?
Epping.
Epping, thank you.
Yeah.
You also mentioned you wanted the ambulance, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay,
ambulance, please.
that's fine. Stay with me. Connecting
Thank you.
police and ambulance. That's my job, thank you. My pleasure.
Hello, I need an ambulance to 55A Boundary Road.
What
Epping
suburb?
North.
What
Epping
suburb?
North.
Epping
Epping
North.
North.
Just let me find it here. What corner street's closest?
Close, Back Street.
What's wrong? What's wrong?
I'm not sure someone, I think I'm not sure.
You need to tell me why you need an ambulance. What's wrong?
Yeah, I think someone died. I'm not sure.
Why do you think someone's dying?
I don't know.
You need to tell me something. You're asking for an ambulance, but why?
Yeah, I also need a police.
Yeah, why? What's wrong?
Because I think someone would die.
Yeah, you need to say why. What have you seen or heard that makes you think someone is going to die?
Mom, please.
What is wrong? Don't scream. Just answer my questions. What's wrong?
Wait a moment, Lynn. Someone.
Can I talk to someone else? Is there anyone else there?
No one.
Who's in the background talking?
Because someone to be killed.
Is someone bleeding? Is someone unconscious?
I think they died.
Why? Why?
I'm not sure, but maybe someone killed my brother's family.
Why do you think that?
Ultimately, she wasn't sure what she was seeing, but she was obviously distressed. So when police and paramedics arrived, Kathy was the only one there to speak with them. She told them that her husband Robert had to go pick up her parents who lived in Maryland's. So investigators got inside of the home and they began to find bodies in every single room they looked in. Each family member had been murdered in their own room, bashed so badly that they were beyond recognition. There was said to be extreme blood splatter from the floor to the ceiling. It was said that the bedrooms were awash with shed blood. They had to be careful where they stepped to avoid these large pools of blood. Lily was on her bed covered in blood, naked from the waist up, and Norman was nowhere to be seen. Irene was found slumped against the wall in her room with a large blood smears on the wall. In the boys' room, there was blood splattered across the walls as though they were moving as they were bludgeoned. Now, there was no evidence of forced injury. The door was already allegedly unlocked when Kathy and Robert had arrived. The circuit breaker had been located by the killer and the lights had been turned off. So due to this, it was believed that the killer knew the layout of this home. At first, when they were unable to find Norman, they believed he could have been responsible, that it was a murder-suicide. He would then be found next to his wife under a quilt. During the autopsies, a forensic analysis would be used to identify each member of the family, and the murder weapon was believed to be a hammer-like object. 4 out of the 5 victims had additional signs of asphyxia as well, and there were 24 bloody shoe prints found at the crime scene, determined to be a US size 8.5 to 10.5 shoe. This was believed to be a lone attacker. These footprints were all through the house, but it was believed to indicate that this killer knew the family, as it appeared as though this killer and the footprints had not shown that they tried to enter the room of Brenda Lin at all, like they knew she wasn't home. No bloody footprints were found near her door or in her room. The victims were all believed to be asleep at the time of the attack. Lily and Norman were believed to be killed first in the bedroom while they slept, bludgeoned to death, then Irene, then Henry, and then Terry. Terry was struck 6 times and Henry was struck 3. Brenda took the first flight back home and she was met by the police. She was ushered into a room with Kathy and Robert, who immediately hugged her and were sobbing, and she knew in that moment that this was all real. They were all placed in a secret location due to concerns for her safety. July 22nd, 2009, 3 days after the murders, Robert Z was interviewed about what he had seen that day as he had found the bodies with his wife. He needed a translator for part of his interview. He said that all he saw was red.
I can see everywhere was red. Red and everywhere.
我首先睇到係阿嫂應該係。
I think I saw my sister-in-law first.
我睇到之後，我即刻就攬住 Cassie， 我話 Cassie， 我老婆唔好睇，唔好睇。
Once I saw her, I hold Kathy and I said, Kathy, don't look at it.
但係我相信 Cassie 都睇到啦。
But I believe Kathy had already seen.
然後喺床嘅靠呢一邊咧，應該係一團，我認為係佢歌嚟嘅。
And I saw that the bedside, which is close to the door, I saw this side. I saw a staff, a group staff. I think it was her brother.
亦都係
like a pile. Yeah, a pile.
因為我一路都覺得佢哥應該喺度，我睇到佢嘅車，跟住又睇到佢鎖匙。
I always think that her brother was in as well because I saw her
his
I saw his van
and Cassie saw
and Kathy saw his watch.
但係我仲係覺得好紅、好紅、好亂嘅感覺。
But I just feel it was so red and messy everywhere.
我哋就行出嚟，係我向呢邊行，我行先，同住 Cassie 出咗嚟。
And so we went out from the room. I went out with Kathy.
然後我哋就跑去另外嗰啲房間度。
We ran to the other room.
睇到樓梯過嚟，以前個地圖上 Terry 嗰個房係關住門嘅。
I saw the Terry's room I indicated before. Used to be Terry's room. The door was closed.
應該係 Cassie 推開門。
Kathy pushed open the door.
我哋見到 Irene 喺床上面。
We saw Irene on the bed.
因為我想知道佢係咪仲活住。
I tried to touch her. I went closer. I tried to touch her because I want to know whether she was still alive.
因為我覺得佢當時我睇到佢唔係完全平攤喺床上嘅。
Because when I saw her, she was not just lie down on the bed flatly.
所以我想試一試。
So I want to try.
不過 Cassie 拉住我。
But Kathy hold me back.
所以我好可能係冇掂到佢嘅。
So I think I did not actually touch her.
就係地圖上Henry嗰個房間。
There's Henry's bedroom I indicate on the map. The door was half closed.
同樣都係一眼睇到係兩個細路仔喺地下度。
We can see both children were lying on the floor.
然後我又係好想去摸下佢哋，睇下佢哋係咪仲活住，因為兩個細路仔。
I want to touch them because they are just little kids. I really want to know whether they are still alive or not.
我記得我係伸右手去嘗試去掂佢哋。
I remember I tried to reach them by my right hand.
我真係唔好記得啦。
But I can't remember.
然後應該係 Cassie 拉住我走，我哋要走啦。
Kathy held me back and she
一路
kept
叫，好驚咁一路大聲叫。
She kept yelling, "Let's go, let's go." She was so frightening.
當然我都好frightened.
I was afraid as well.
Investigators found that Robert was this ear, nose, and throat specialist in China, and then they migrated to Australia to be close to Kathy's family. They had initially moved to Melbourne, Australia, where Robert had tried to open a restaurant. Now, this ended up failing, but then they were able to move closer to the Lins in Sydney. They were always hanging out together, and they occasionally helped with the news agency as well. They lived about 300 meters or 984 feet away, and that's why they were able to get to the location of their home so quickly that morning. Robert said he was horrified. He was trying to stop Kathy from looking at everything. He was scared. It frightened him. He said he did not know who could have been responsible. Kathy was interviewed, and she said that she went inside with her husband Robert. She saw her sister-in-law Lily in the bed with blood marks on the wall. Beside her, she thought that it was her brother under the covers, but she couldn't see any part of his body. And due to them being the first to find the bodies, they were, of course, persons of interest in the investigation. Robert's car was also seized, but they weren't necessarily suspects. 11 days after the murder on July 29th, Kathy and Robert made a public appeal for information regarding the killings. Brenda wanted to go back to her home, But she was terrified when she got there. At night, she pictured what had happened to her family. She was also too young to live alone, and so she went to live with her aunt and her uncle. They had taken in this sole survivor, Brenda, to live with them as her legal guardians for that point. They also took over the news agency store that the Lins had started and operated. Brenda was said to be grieving her family so greatly that it was hard to look at other families. She would have given anything to have her family back. She even recorded a message to be played at the funeral for all 5 of her family members. A month later, a strike force was set up to coordinate the investigation. They were focused on the bloody shoe prints found. The public speculated that this was possibly a gang-related kill or a debt motive, but there was no evidence of this, though the police did confirm that they were looking to China, where the parents were from, for possible mafia links, but they were not finding anything. While the case appeared to go cold, what many didn't know was that Detective Sergeant Joe Marie was still working the case. A month after the murder, investigators actually found that burglaries were occurring in Epping and an arrest had been made. Now, this was interesting due to the fact that Norman Lynn had witnessed a robbery 2 months prior to his murder. It was at the Epping Club, which was across the street from his news agency. So investigators wondered if maybe there was a connection between these burglaries and these murders. But no information was revealed for years. 2 years later, on May 5th, 2011, it shocked everybody when an arrest would be made in this case. The New South Wales Crime Commission had been working this case for 2 years, and what the public didn't know, and Brenda didn't know, was that they had this suspect nearly the entire time. You see, investigators had found a possible match of the shoe prints to an Asics tennis shoe, a shoe that their now suspect was seen wearing. In secret, they had placed surveillance cameras inside of his home to gather evidence. What they would find would lead to a disturbing secret and footage of tampering with possible evidence. The Crime Commission would set up a 6-month surveillance and saw their suspect ripping up shoeboxes of that exact tennis shoe inside of this home. They were also size 9, which fit the profile. He then flushed the pieces down the toilet. Just before this, Kathy had actually been brought into the police department to be given an update of the murders of the Lins. She was told that the footprints that were found inside the home matched an Asics sneaker. However, they had already had cameras set up, so when she went home and told her husband the update, soon after, her husband Robert was ripping up boxes. That's right, the uncle. But that wasn't all he was seen doing. These 6 months of footage also caught him inappropriately touching the orphaned niece that he had brought in. There was a huge chance the survivor was living with her family's killer. She had been sent to live with this man for safety, but he was the very person that she should have feared. Brenda's principal was actually worried about Robert from the very beginning. She had once seen an argument between Robert and Brenda where he was up in Brenda's face talking in Chinese. Brenda was sobbing, and after spending the day with the two of them, the principal actually went home and told her husband that she thought she spent the day with the murderer. But of course, she had no evidence to back this up. But now that investigators had this evidence, they were able to obtain a search warrant of the Z home. They had gotten a tip that Robert had cleaned his garage the morning of the murders. So they searched this garage, and under a chest of drawers, they found a stain on the floor. This was believed to be blood, and it was taken in for analysis. And that's when it was found to match the DNA of the Lin family victims. So, on May 5th, Robert was arrested. Investigators stated that he appeared to be surprised, and Kathy and Brenda were also just as taken aback. Robert was charged with 5 counts of murder, while police announced that he had become their prime suspect about 6 months into the investigation of the killings. Yet for another 1.5 years, Brenda remained in his care. When Robert tried to appeal the bail to the New South Wales Supreme Court the next year, the police announced that Henry and Terry, the little boys, had woken up during the attacks and were likely killed, and brutally, due to being able to identify their uncle. He was not granted bail. However, a judge did claim that a jury might not find enough evidence to convict him. On February 1st of 2013, Robert pleaded not guilty for the first time. At trial, the first trial in September of 2013, this would reveal that Robert had confessed allegedly to a cellmate about the murder, stating that he sedated his own wife in order to commit the murders that morning and her not notice that he was gone. He also said he didn't want to be the person that discovered the bodies because that would make him the prime suspect. But circumstances meant he was with his wife Kathy when she found the bodies. He was also worried about CCTV revealing that he drove from North Epping to Maryland's that morning. Now, this inmate who had recorded this confession allegedly also said that he had witnessed Robert in the yard of the jail screaming at an elderly inmate for using the walking frame. The inmate said that Robert went from about 0 to 100 and the whole exercise yard stopped. This was the first time that anyone had ever said they had had an issue as far as with Robert's behavior. But the original motive that the prosecution was going to argue was that Robert's attempt to start his own restaurant was unsuccessful. He felt slighted due to this loss and his loss of status compared to his successful in-laws. Prosecution said that this was a crime of intense bitterness, jealousy, hatred, and this was all towards his brother-in-law, who was held in such a high regard, which in his mind was undeserving. The prosecution said that after Robert drugged his wife and murdered the Lynn family, he disposed of the murder weapon after Kathy had found the bodies. They stated that the blood smear in the garage could have been from where he sat the murder weapon, his shoes, or clothing on the floor. The prosecution also said that he had access to their home. He was an ear, nose, and throat specialist with knowledge of the body, which would have been helpful with the asphyxiation being part of the cause of death of the victims. And there was also allegedly a device in Robert's home that was covered in gauze that appeared to be similar to the alleged murder weapon that had never been found. Prosecutors also said that Robert made no attempt to check if anyone was still alive in the home despite his medical training. However, the defense argued that the families were very close, that Robert loved those boys as if they were his own and it didn't fit the narrative that he would murder them. They said he had an alibi and there is actually 3 brands of shoes that the shoe prints may have belonged to along with the one linked to Robert. They said he was also not the only one in the world to wear those shoes. The defense said that the device found in the home had no similarities to the hammer-like murder weapon, and that the jailhouse confession was just simply jail talk, and the part of him confessing to sedating his wife was actually not the part that was recorded, and therefore it was not true. But then Brenda, the sole survivor of her family, was about to make it even harder for him to be found not guilty. A now 17-year-old Brenda would reveal to the prosecution that she had been groomed by her uncle long before she lived with him. She would later admit it to herself and then to police that Robert had touched her inappropriately before the murders even occurred, and that assault escalated when she moved in with him. She was essayed regularly until he was arrested. The prosecution's main motive then became that Robert killed Brenda's entire family due to his sexual behavior with Brenda and his interest for complete access to her. What's heartbreaking was that Brenda did not believe that this was a part of the story or would in any way change the trial or the outcome. She didn't believe it was significant. And when she told this prosecutor, he was shocked with this information, and this actually created the need for a whole new trial, which started in August of 2014. Now, Detective Senior Officer Martin Wilson told the jury that Robert was acting strangely after the murders. He was making jokes in the hospital about paintings while the family was mourning. He was pointing to BMWs he wanted to buy, and he was demanding keys to the Lynn's news agency. Now, this second trial wouldn't occur because this judge would fall ill. So the third trial then began in February 2015, and Robert again pleaded not guilty. His defense argued that the injuries inflicted on the victims indicated that there were multiple killers. And so on December of 2015, the trial ended, but in a hung jury with Robert released on bail. This was even after the judge said that she would accept 11-1 instead of unanimous, but they still couldn't come to that decision. Now, Robert's wife, Kathy, was still fighting for his release. She insisted that he was innocent. She was excited about his bail, saying that it was the greatest Christmas present and she loved him. He told reporters he was grateful to be home and he would continue to fight for his innocence. So Robert had been released on bail December 2015, and the fourth trial began in June of 2016. This trial also revealed that Robert had offered to adopt Brenda in the hours after the murders, possibly for further easier access to her. Kathy then gave her husband an alibi, stating that Robert was home in bed with her when the murders took place. The prosecution said that the jailhouse confession disproved this. Now, Brenda read her victim impact statement to the court, saying, "It has been 7.5 years since I have lost my family. That's 7.5 years without a loving mother, 7.5 years without a loving father, 7.5 years without 2 exuberant brothers who were my best and closest friends, and 7.5 years without an extremely kind aunt. In this time, I have finished my HSC, was accepted into uni, got my first part-time job, and learned to drive. But I have achieved all of these things without my family beside me. These inherently happy moments are now at most bittersweet. They have now become a painful reminder of the family I have lost and I will never see again." Again, the jury could not come to an agreement, and Justice Fullerton said she would accept majority 11-1 as well. So on January 12th of 2017, Robert was found guilty of 5 counts of murder. He was said to sedate his wife around 2 a.m., heading to the Lynn's home, cutting the electricity, and using the key to get inside, carrying a hammer-like weapon assembled for max effect to incapacitate and kill. He then beat Norman and Lily while they slept, then Irene. The boys were believed to wake up trying to escape before they were murdered. The blood pattern on their bedroom walls showed that there was a furious struggle in the bedroom. It was believed that Robert then went back to the parents' room and rearranged their bodies so they were in a V shape, with Norman under the covers. Robert was then seen cleaning his own garage at 6 a.m. and when he went back to the Lynn's home with Kathy, he was hugging her, telling her not to look upon entering the parents' bedroom. He then left his wife in the house to call 000 to do who knows what. Possibly, allegedly, get rid of the murder weapon. Now, for the entirety of the trials, Robert remained calm and composed. He would occasionally nod towards his lawyers or look at his wife, but he was mostly just sitting with a blank expression on his face. But when he heard his sentence, he rose and he said, "I did not murder the Lin family. I am innocent." His wife, Kathy, behind him, then stood up and cried, "He's innocent." He was sentenced to 5 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Outside of the courthouse, Kathy told reporters that Robert did not kill her brother's family, that he was a loving and caring family man. She said, "We want the police to tell us what happened in my brother's family, but he was wrongly charged. The crime he did not commit. He is a scapegoat in this." But Justice Elizabeth Fullerton has said that she had took Brenda's essay into consideration for the sentencing. The judge announced that Brenda was having difficulty sleeping. She was having mental health issues and trouble with her studies due to this. The judge commended Brenda for her strength and dignity, but Robert was never charged with her essay. Norman's parents said, "My son has been avenged. The law has given me truth. God can see this." Now, it was only years after the murders in 2017 that Brenda would speak out for the first time. She would also be identified at this time, as her name had been kept out of the public as she was still a minor. She said she was talking about it now because she had been in a place where she was very bitter throughout the years, but she had since been around really good people who taught her that not all people are evil. She regrets not being able to thank her amazing father, tell him that she loved him. She never told him that she was grateful for all that he did. And you could tell this interview was extremely hard on her, even years later, to talk about this. She said that she was upset for a long time that they left her behind. She said she went to live with her aunt and her uncle, and she didn't realize how bad of a person Robert was. She was taught that members of her family were good people, no matter what they did. She was shocked to hear that her principal felt like Robert could have been the murderer before he was convicted. She ended up saying, how did she know? But Brenda spoke a little bit about Robert's disturbing behavior and the essay. She said she was insecure. He knew that and he used it against her. And in an interview in 2017, she spoke about how she was essayed, but she wasn't ready to talk about it. She said maybe one day. But her lawyer said when she had come to him and told him about the essay, she didn't believe that it would be helpful at all. But it ended up being everything in this trial. Brenda brought 7 News Media to her parents' birthplace, where she had traveled to be with them, see where they had come from, and she spoke about how her Aunt Kathy still believes that Robert is innocent and often texts her saying so. So they do not have much contact, but Brenda does have a family member in her principal who has stuck with her since the murders occurred. 7 years later, Brenda actually graduated college and started a non-profit organization, which is a network of 12 meetup hubs in Australia called the Survivor Network. This is to assist others in their recovery process, and she's now an advocate for survivors of SA. She too attends these meetings for help, and it makes sure that no one is alone on the holidays.
The main reason why we want to do something, we want to make something good come out of something really bad, is to be able to make new meaning of such a horrible experience and to know that something good has come out of it. Great friends from high school, my neighbours upstairs, colleagues at work who've always have gone above and beyond, extended a helping hand when I've not been doing well. It wasn't until many years afterwards had I then realised, actually this wasn't okay, this is actually sexual assault, this is illegal, and I need to do something about it. Incredibly encouraging to know that I can make a difference just by sharing my lived experience. It means that I can make someone else's journey a little bit easier.
She has said that her uncle no longer occupies her mind. He's in prison, and that's enough for her. At age 30, Brenda was studying for a doctorate in criminology, rehabilitation, and youth justice at Sydney University. She said, I don't think I'm anything special. When anyone is put in a situation, you just learn to survive. Human nature shows how strong we are in times of need. A lot of people in society who have achieved things did so under difficult situations. Her friends say that one of the most beautiful things that they love to hear her say is, hope is the only thing that keeps everyone living, which is a beautiful reminder from a beautiful survivor. But while many were content with Robert's sentencing, some believed that he was framed. In fact, investigative journalist Andrew L. Urban has written an entire book called Framed that claims to reveal how bias, unreliable science, and a flawed legal process put an innocent man behind bars while the real killers remain free. Andrew has said that there is no direct evidence nor any credible circumstantial evidence, and he argued that the evening before the murders, the whole family were together besides the mother Lily, the aunt Irene. So they were all at Norman and Kathy's parents' home. They all left around 10 p.m. and the autopsy reports state that the victims died between July 17th and July 18th, meaning that it could have been any time between like 10:30 p.m. and 2 a.m. And up until 2 a.m., he alleges that Robert could be linked to being on the computer as activity was shown at that time that night. So he doesn't believe that he would have been out of the home at that time to be able to murder them. This investigative journalist also mentioned that alleged drug smuggling in Sydney was rampant during this time, using newsagent post office boxes in the front windows, which were not under surveillance, to smuggle these. Several customers of the Lynn's news agency allegedly saw heated conversations between Norman and other customers. So Andrew stated that he believed that Norman could be recognized by regular recipients of these drugs and became a threat to their operations, and that was the real motive. What do you believe? Do you think there was enough evidence to convict him? I do think the fact that there had to be 4 trials and it still almost ended in a hung jury does say a lot, but also at the same time, the fact that Brenda has admitted to what her uncle did to her, it does really point to guilt for the murders. That is a huge motive for this uncle to have, to want to not only keep Brenda's parents quiet about what he had done to Brenda if she had mentioned it to them, but also have further access to her, because that is one of the first things he mentioned to investigators, was that he wanted to adopt Brenda. So disturbing. Disgusting. But I love to see it that Brenda is doing well and she's helping other people. And it's a beautiful thing to see. So I wish her all of the blessings in the world. But I would love to know what you think the real motive was here. If it was a combination of wanting the news agency's store as well as the sexual motive. If it was something else entirely. Do you think Kathy actually knew anything about it? From the 911 call, it really seemed that she was devastated and distressed. Like she did not know this was happening. But then why would you stay by the side of the man who everyone else is saying is a killer and who your niece is saying assaulted her under your roof? Why would you still stand by him? I'm speechless that a woman could do that after hearing what her niece had said. And then continuing to message her niece and tell her that he was innocent. But you tell me, is there any way that you believe that this man could be innocent and his wife is sticking with him because she knows he was framed? And in that case, who is the real killer? And why was no one else ever looked into in this case? Thank you so much for clicking on this video. I hope that I was able to tell you a little about Brenda Lin and her story. And I hope I did it justice, because she deserves all of the happiness and the praise for how courageous she was for speaking out and everything that she had to go through prior to that. It does anger me a lot that the police knew, or believed they knew, for about 1.5 years that this man had done something horrific to Brenda's family, and yet they left her there in his custody. But don't forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces.